can hear me okay? How's the sound? Okay? Good. There are 251 town meeting members and 126 constitutes a quorum. The constable informs me that 131 are present. The first session of the 256th annual town meeting will now come to order. The clerk will read the call and return of the meeting.
To one of the constables of the town of Amherst in said county, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify the registered voters of the town of Amherst of the annual town meeting to be held in the auditorium of the Amherst Pelham Regional Middle School in said Amherst at 7 o'clock on Monday, the 28th day of April 2014, when the following articles will be acted upon by town meeting members. You are hereby directed to serve this call by posting attested copies thereof at the usual places. Hereof fail not, and make return of this warrant with your doings thereon at the time and place of said meeting, given under our hands this 31st day of March 2014. Aaron A. Hayden, James J. Wall, Constance C. Kruger, Elisa V. Brewer, Andrew J. Steinberg, Select Board. Hampshire SS, in obedience to the within warrant, I have this day as directed posted true and attested copies thereof at the designated places. Jennifer A. Reynolds, Constable, Town of Amherst.
Thank you. I have already been sworn in as moderator by the town clerk. At this point, I would like to ask all newly elected town meeting members to rise and be sworn in. Do you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of town meeting member? Please answer, I do. Thank you, and congratulations. I'd also like to congratulate those who have been elected to townwide offices in the last election. For the school committee, Catherine Appy; select board, Constance Kruger and Andrew Steinberg; Jones Library trustees, Christopher Hoffman and Michael Wolf; housing authority, Peter Jessup. Thank you in advance for your service. I will now call on our town manager, Mr. Masanti, for another quick introduction.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take just a moment to introduce to town meeting two individuals. The success of the work we do really is a team effort, and that includes the work we do with the local business community. And I want to introduce two folks tonight. First, Don Cordemanche is here. He is the newly appointed Executive Director of the Amherst Chamber of Commerce, and he's in the back. I want to welcome him to the town of Amherst. Look forward to working with him. And Sarah LaCour, who you all know, because she wears many hats, including town meeting member, but she is the very capable Executive Director of the Amherst Business Improvement District. So welcome to them both.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. That's the last time you're going to be applauding for a while. Just want to mention some Finance Committee appointments. Sarah Swartz and Mary Lou Talman have been reappointed to new 3-year terms on the Finance Committee. Andrew Steinberg has resigned his position on the Finance Committee. I will be making an appointment to fill Mr. Steinberg's seat after the 2014 annual town meeting is dissolved. I would like to thank Mr. Steinberg for his service on the committee, but I'm sure he agrees that applause is not necessary. At this point, it is a tradition to remember former town meeting members who have passed away since the last town meeting. There's no comprehensive list of former members, so if I've forgotten somebody, please let me know, and I'll remember them in a subsequent session. Since we've met last fall, we have lost Bill Hutchinson, Ellen Goodwin, and Alice Carlozzi. Please rise if you're able, and let's have a moment of silence to remember our friends, neighbors, and public servants. Thank you. I now have some reminders from the moderator, a lot of different things. Please try and pay attention. They're all things that I think are fairly important. First, the League of Women Voter publications. The League and Town Meeting Coordinating Committee provide 4 publications which are particularly useful to us and should be available on the back table if you don't already have a copy. Your Amherst Government, the Town Meeting Handbook, the Zoning Primer, and the They Represent You brochure, which lists all elected officials, including town meeting members. Please check the brochure, if it's available, to make sure that your information is correct. When you checked in, you received a packet of red and green tally vote cards. These cards might be needed in any of the sessions of town meeting this spring, so please remember to bring your cards with you to future sessions. Even though you don't need to pick up new tally cards, you must check in every night of town meeting. A couple words about seating. The seats on the floor of the auditorium may be occupied only by town meeting members, except for the front row, which may be used by members of the press and by members of town committees and town staff participating in the presentation or discussion of articles. Such persons must wear non-voter stickers, which are available from the checkers at the entrance. The seats in the front row of this section here in front of me can also be used by those who are on deck. If the next article is one that you will be presenting or expect to be questioned on, please come forward and sit in one of these seats before the vote on the current article. The seats in front of me on the right facing you are occupied by the Select Board, the Town Manager, the Finance Director, the Assistant to the Town Manager, and an Administrative Assistant from the Town Manager's office. The Finance Committee is seated to my left. Spectators and town residents who are not town meeting members may be seated in the bleachers in the rear of the auditorium. New information for town meeting members can be found on the back table to my left. That's the table over there. Old information can be found on the back table to my right. The Finance Committee report, which you have all received in the mail, is an excellent resource that you should take advantage of. It includes the complete town meeting schedule inside the front cover and an excellent glossary in the back. Amherst Media provides gavel-to-gavel coverage of our proceedings on Public Access Channel 17. I'd like to thank their staff and volunteers. Videos of town meeting sessions are replayed frequently and can also be viewed on the Amherst Media website. If you wish to speak, you must raise a hand and be recognized. When appropriate, please hold up a green or red card to indicate pro or con on the issue. When you're called on, please first state your name and precinct. If you forget, I will interrupt and ask you to do so. If you need more than 3 minutes or more than 5 minutes when making a motion, you must request additional time before speaking, and town meeting will vote on your request. If you are speaking from the floor, please speak into a microphone that will be provided once you are recognized. This will allow the viewers outside the auditorium to hear you. The microphone will be on when it is handed to you. Please hold it close to your mouth when you speak. Non-members who wish to speak should stand at the rear of the right-hand aisle. Any registered voter of the town of Amherst who is recognized by the moderator may speak without special permission. Others may speak with the permission of a majority. Assisted listening devices are available for town meeting members at the soundboard in the back of the auditorium. If you are making an amendment to a motion, the amendment must be presented in writing with 4 copies submitted to the following people or groups: the town clerk, the moderator, the town manager and staff, and the chair of the Finance Committee or the chair of whichever board is seated to my left. A copy machine is located at the end of the table to my right. This may be used to make copies of amendments. Procedural motions, such as a motion to refer or a motion to dismiss, does not need to be presented in writing. If you are making an amendment to a portion of the operating budget, please specify the dollar amount greater or less than the amount in the Finance Committee motion. If you make any motion from the floor, it must be the first thing you do after you have been recognized and have identified yourself. You cannot speak first and then make a motion. If you've not already done so, please check your cell phone and make sure it is silenced or off. There is wireless available in this auditorium, particularly if it's for town meeting related business that you want to be looking on the internet. The wireless network is named Guest, and the ID is TM Guest, which is TMGUEST, and the password is May14TM, all lowercase. The Red Sox aren't playing tonight, so I don't see why anybody needs any wireless, but it's there if you need it. A couple reminders about the Town Meeting Coordinating Committee. You all received a Town Meeting Coordinating Committee survey in your first packet. Please leave your completed survey in the box on the back table. The TMCC will be holding elections during the 5th town meeting session on May 12th. There are 4 vacancies on the committee. If you wish to be a member or if you wish to nominate someone else, nomination papers can be downloaded from the town website. If you are not able to download papers, they are also available here at town meeting. The nomination deadline is May 6th. You can submit nomination papers and candidate statements here at town meeting or at the town clerk's office. This is an important committee that is working hard to educate and inform town meeting members and to improve the process of town meeting. Please participate as a voter or as a candidate. A couple extra reminders just from me. I will be reasonably strict on time limits, and I will always try and call on people who have not yet spoken. If at any point in time you are confused about the proceedings, it is appropriate to call a point of order and ask for a clarification. It is also okay to phone me, send me an email, or see me prior to town meeting if you need an explanation of any kind. If you wish to speak, you must raise your hand and be recognized. When appropriate, hold up the red or green card. Again, when you are called on, first state your name and precinct. If you forget, I will interrupt you. I will not call on members by name, even if I know perfectly well who you are. I will stop speakers when your time is up and ask you to finish your current sentence. I will attempt to be consistent with all speakers and equally fair or unfair to all, but I will be inclined to give some deference to board and committee members, petitioners, and town employees. Okay. Our next item is the consent calendar. You all received a consent calendar and a cover letter in your second mailing. The consent calendar will hopefully be displayed before you on the screen. Can we get it up there? Look at that. I'm going to first call on article numbers one at a time and ask for a show of hands of those who wish to remove that article from the consent calendar. If I see hands, the article will be removed. There's no debate in this process. So again, raise your hand if you want to remove an article as I call it out. Article 2. I see no hands. Article 3. I see no hands. Article 4. No hands. Article 7. No hands. Article 8. No hands. Article 10. No hands. And Article 13. No hands. I will now accept a motion from the Select Board to remove all warrant articles included in the consent calendar of the 2014 annual town meeting and the printed motions thereunder, and approve those articles as a single unit.
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. We will now come to an immediate vote without debate on the consent calendar motions. All those in favor of the consent calendar motions, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Consent calendar passes unanimously. We now have some procedural motions. I first recognize Catherine Appy. I don't know where you are. There you are. Probably identify yourself first.
Yes, I'm Catherine Oppie, Amherst School Committee and Regional School Committee, and I would like to make the following motion. I move to consider the elementary and regional school portions of Article 12 on May 7th, 2014 at 7:05 p.m.
I hear a second. You may now speak to your motion.
This is primarily a scheduling issue, and additionally, Leverett, Pelham, and Shutesbury are holding their town meetings on Saturday, May 3rd. We would like to present to our town meeting after the other regional towns have held their meetings.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this before we come to a vote?
May 7th.
Yes. May 7th, which is a Wednesday.
Which is a Wednesday,
Yes.
right, Wednesday night.
I see no hands, so we will come to a vote. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. I now call on Mr. O'Connor for a procedural motion. Is Vince O'Connor in the house? We'll get back to him when he comes back. We can do the next one instead. In that case, I will call on Ms. Streeter for a procedural motion.
Mary Streeter, Precinct 8. I move to consider Article 20, Part C, Affordable Housing Units at Rolling Green on June 2nd, 2014 at 7:05 p.m.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Okay, you may speak to your motion.
Due to the timing of the real estate negotiations for the Rolling Green project, the CPA committee voted last Thursday night unanimously to consider this article at the June 2nd meeting after the completion of the June 2nd special town meeting. It is quite possible that the CPA committee will offer a different article to be considered at the special town meeting. Negotiations are ongoing.
Any discussion or questions on this procedural motion? I see no hands. We will now come to a vote. Oh, I see a hand. Yes. Can we get a microphone over there, please? You recognize you?
Amy Middleman, Precinct 5. It says June 20th on the board. It says June 20th on the screen.
Thank you very much. Somebody is paying attention. I love that. Okay, so the motion is now as it is before you for June 2nd at 7:05 p.m. I see no other hands, so let's come to a vote. All in favor of this procedural motion, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. And now, Mr. O'Connor, you have a procedural motion?
Yes, I do, Mr. Moderator. Vincent O'Connor.
Hold the microphone up, please.
Vincent O'Connor, Precinct 1. I move that the town meeting consider Article 37 immediately after Article 20.
Do I hear a second? And you may speak your motion.
Just briefly, Article 37 relates to the Community Preservation Act and increasing the request for funds for that, putting it on the ballot in November. And I'd like to have it considered right after we speak about the Community Preservation Act, the substance of the motions being brought this year, also so that the chair of the committee can speak to the article and not have to return to town meeting at some future time.
Any questions or further discussion of this procedural motion? I see no hands. And is this one up here in front of us? Yes. We will now come to immediate vote on moving Article 37. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. We now move on to procedural motion by Mr. Schreiber. By the way, I should have mentioned, but I didn't, these procedural motions require a majority vote to pass.
I'm Stephen Schreiber, Precinct 9 and Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I move to consider Article 24 on Monday, June 2nd, 2014 at 7:10 p.m.
I hear a second. You may speak to your motion.
The Planning Board is continuing to work on some revisions to the inclusionary zoning amendments that are outside of the scope of what current Article 24 contains. The Planning Board will hold a public hearing on May 7th to consider those revisions. And if it decides to go forward with them, it will request that the Select Board schedule a special town meeting on June 2nd to consider that revised version. On June 2nd, any revised version would be considered first in the special town meeting, and after the town meeting has acted on it, the special town meeting would be closed. The annual town meeting would resume, and Article 24 would be considered.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? I see no hands. We'll come to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The ayes have it. It's passed. We now move to Article 1. see if we can get it on the board here. Article 1, to see if the town will hear those reports of town officers, the Finance Committee, and any other town boards or committees which are not available in written form. And I have a motion by Ms. Kruger. No, first just make your motion. I move.
Move to, in terms of the article.
Thank you. You may now speak to your motion.
I just wanted to let people know, I think you've picked up on the back table tonight, we have written positions and votes. So on the ones that don't really require comment, other than this one, which doesn't, I would just pass and refer you to the sheet.
Yeah, could you try and get your closer to, I think you just need to be closer to it.
Is this where, oh,
Yeah,
all right,
just need to be
sorry.
closer.
I just wanted to refer you to our positions on the sheet that was on the back table tonight, Select Board Reports to April 28th, 2014 Annual Town Meeting. But we do, we move in terms of the article, but most of our positions are here, so we're not going to speak to all of them. Oh, which is revised from what you received in the second mailing. Thank you.
So where does it say dismiss? Okay, I'll let you. And statement for the Finance Committee, Ms. Moran.
The Finance Committee recommends this.
Thank you. This requires a majority vote. Is there any further discussion? I should say that the only report that I know of, there's a report on the regional school planning process that Mr. Steinberg is going to give under Article 1, and then Mr. Masanti is going to be talking about the budget, so it's technically under Article 1, but he'll be giving that report when we get to Article 12. So any further discussion before we come to a vote? I see no hands. All those in favor of the motion under Article 1, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it unanimously. It's passed. I now call on Mr. Steinberg to give a report on the regional school planning process.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and be really brief, but I did want to bring you up to date on what's happened with regional school planning process. For those who are new to town meeting, on November 9, 2011, a special town meeting appointed or designated a regional school district planning committee of 3 members. The purpose of the committee was to consider whether we should regionalize our elementary schools with other towns as we have a regional district for our secondary schools. That passed, and the moderator appointed 3 members, myself, Ms. Brewer, Alyssa Brewer, who's sitting next to me, and Catherine Oppie from the school committee, who spoke a few minutes ago with the motion. The process that is involved when a regional school district planning committee is created to consider the formation of a new region is that the committee will then meet, and if it determines that it should get together in further discussions with one or more other communities, it votes to form a regional school district planning board, and then the regional school district planning board will consider whether it has a recommendation to make, and if so, that in Amherst must come before a vote of all voters, and it would have been in a regular or special election of voters. What has transpired since then is that substantial consideration was given to whether we should form a 4-town pre-kindergarten to grade 6 region with the 3 other towns that are members of the regional or consortium for the secondary schools, but to leave it as 2 separate regions. And of course, those other towns are Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury. As the process moved along, we came to a conclusion at the 4-town regional school district planning board to do two things. This decision was made in December of 2013, just this past December. One decision was that we would like to consider a pre-K, pre-kindergarten to grade 12 region with the option available for some towns to not participate for pre-kindergarten to grade 6. And the second thing that we determined was appropriate, since it was then involving the current region, is to ask that it be considered as an amendment to the current regional agreement instead of the creation of a new region. The consequences of that are, one, that the Regional School District Planning Committee has suspended its work as a Regional School District Planning Committee and Board. It is not dissolved, but has suspended its work. The second factor is that the Regional School Committee, which has the responsibility for recommending amendments to the current regional agreement, asked the 12 people who serve from the 4 towns on the Regional School District Planning Board and their individual town committees to constitute a regional agreement working group to consider recommendations of the amendments that would be required to the regional agreement. The third factor, and this is very important for you, is that the approval process would then be different. The approval process would be a town meeting vote and not a full town election. So the decision, if it's presented to you, will be made here. That will be a decision that will ultimately be made by the Regional School Committee, the current Regional School Committee. So the process is that there will be we will continue. There will be forums. You will be informed of the forums. We may be calling them open houses because they're going to be associated with the various schools, including the elementary schools and middle and high school. But we will inform all of you as prospective voters in the ultimate process of the date, and that you should be aware that if this process reaches a conclusion and a recommendation, that this is an item that could come before the town meeting in the fall. And so that's my report, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to Article 2, I want to briefly go back to the consent calendar again to point out a typo that was there but has been corrected now. Apparently, so if you notice, the motion under Article 2 was a motion to dismiss because we didn't have any unpaid bills, but all the others were motions in terms of the article. But apparently, when it was up on the screen before and we voted, Article 2, it said it was a move to dismiss. I don't believe that anybody intended to dismiss our optional tax exemption, and on our paper here, it said a motion to be in terms of the article. So I just want to make everybody aware of this. I'm going to assume that everybody's intention was to vote in terms of that article. If there's no objections, we won't re-vote it. We will just continue from here. Good, thank you. Okay, we now move on to skip Article 2 and skip Article 3 and skip Article 4, and we move on to Article 5, Capital Program Jones Library Feasibility Study. And I'm not going to read the article. You have it here in front of you. You have it in your Finance Committee book. Instead, I will call on Mr. Surratt to make a motion. I think Mr. Oh, are you making? Oh, Austin's coming. Good.
I'm Austin Surratt. I'm the president of the Jones Library Board of Trustees. Article 5, number A, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Trustees of the Jones Library to proceed with a feasibility study to examine the options for expanding and renovating its current library building or building a new facility.
And would you make your motion under that article, please?
You want me to move that?
I believe you're moving in terms of Part A of the article?
Correct.
Okay, so why don't you say that now?
I'm moving in terms of Part A of the article.
Great. Do I have a second? Okay, you may now speak to your motion.
I'd like to actually ask the director of the library to speak to the motion. Is that acceptable?
You may, yes.
Okay.
And you have 5 minutes to speak to the motion.
I'm Sharon Sherry, Director of the Jones Library. Mr. Moderator, can I have 9 minutes to speak?
An additional 4 minutes for a total of 9 have been requested. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. The ayes have it.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm here to present the library's request for $25,000 towards a Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners Planning and Design Grant. This is the first step towards a much-needed renovation project which would make the Jones safer, more functional, and bring the Jones Library building into the 21st century. During the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners' first round of construction grants in 1993, the Jones Library received a grant which facilitated the renovation and addition to the Jones. Since that project, MBLC grants have become much more sophisticated and forward-looking in order to provide resources to communities to transform library facilities into modern, technologically astute learning centers. While acknowledging that the central location of the Jones is excellent and the exterior is breathtaking, we must recognize the interior's profound needs. The most pressing of these needs is to achieve a higher level of safety and security in the building. We also need to address the dysfunctional workflow due to poor design. Consequently, the Jones Library Board of Trustees has made this building renovation their #1 priority.
I hear a point of order. Yes, wait for a microphone right behind you, I think.
I think Part A was moved, which was just a feasibility study, and this sounds like she's speaking to Part B.
I'm giving her leeway. I don't
Okay.
think she's going to ask for another 9 minutes for Part B. I think this is kind of a single
okay.
thing, so we're going
Right.
for all of it at
Okay,
once.
just want to make sure we're all on the same
Okay,
page.
thanks.
Thank you. I think I lost.
No, it's still there.
It's still there? Okay. We were fortunate to have Rosemary Waltos, a library building specialist from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, as well as Anna Popp from the Massachusetts Library System, visit us to help assess our need for space planning and renovation and expansion. According to Ms. Waltos, the Jones Library is one of 2 most dysfunctional libraries in the state. Specific areas of concern at the Jones Library include the steep pitch of our roof, which dumps snow onto the heads of entering patrons. The atrium roof is poorly designed and has leaked ever since it was installed. Many attempts throughout the years to make it watertight have failed, so we have to keep buckets near the adult circulation desk to collect the rainwater. Maintenance issues such as stained and faded carpets, and peeling paint and plaster. This is our front entryway. Patrons have to walk 40 or 50 feet before they see a staff member. This is not conducive to excellent customer service. The adult circulation desk is also not good for customer service. For one, there are 3 service points, and this confuses patrons. They're never sure which desk they should be standing in front of. And as a staff member, their backs are always facing the patrons. It's also not a big enough area for the required number of staff. The entrance to the children's room is undefined, and the signage is poor. The single bathroom on the main floor is in the children's room. The children's room itself is too small. The collection is housed on 3 different floors. The room is outdated, and the cramped children's librarian's office, which is seen here, is located in what should be a gorgeous reading nook. The young adult area is housed in a corner of the atrium. This space is cramped, there's minimal seating, there are no tables, and the sightlines are poor. Our special collections department is unique, but we are out of storage space, there's no place to process the collection, and the research and reading room isn't large enough. The entire HVAC system needs to be replaced. The cobbled together technology is old and inefficient. The chiller compressor seen here is operating at half capacity due to costly repairs that are needed, and the pneumatic thermostats are very difficult to calibrate if they work at all. Our telecommunications room is scary. There is little space for expansion in the room, and we have data wiring running through the pipes in our boiler room, seen here. Also, the building is not wired properly for a 21st century library. Wiring has been added outside the walls, and we have to use extension cords covered with duct tape on the floors. In order to solve these problems, we have applied for a $50,000 planning and design grant from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, and we are asking the town to appropriate $25,000 in matching funds. It's important to note that because we're proposing to go through this process, the library will be putting off all of these necessary capital projects for now because the state will end up paying for half of the cost. More about that in a minute. In order to give you an overflow of the grant process, let me explain the MBLC's programs, and you can follow along on the handouts that are provided in the back of the room. The first phase is called planning and design, and the second phase is construction renovation. So I'm going to start with planning and design. This grant is somewhat competitive. There are about 35 interested libraries, but only 25 will be funded. There is no wait list for this grant program. If we do not receive the state grant, we would return this $25,000 to the town. If we are awarded the grant, we will combine that state grant money with this $25,000 that we're requesting tonight, and we'll use the total $75,000 for the planning and design phase. It is a 2-year process, which would begin in October of this year. We would start this process by finalizing our building program. So before the architect is hired, this building program is written. It's a very lengthy document which drives the library's design. It's more important that the building be functional rather than just pretty. We don't let the architect tell us what we need, we tell them. There are national guidelines regarding public library size based on service population and usage, which will be used throughout this process. This will guide how large each space will be within the building. In order to be eligible for the state's grant money, we have to propose a building that will be suitable for at least the next 20 years. The state will not pay for a building that's too small, and they will not pay for a building that's too large. So next, this summer, we would establish a feasibility committee and a capital campaign committee, and then in the fall, we would hire a project manager, an architect, and ultimately, at the end of the 2-year process, come up with a set of schematic designs and a cost estimate for the expansion and renovation of the Jones building. Phase 2 of the project involves applying for the state's construction renovation grant, hopefully to be announced in FY17, depending on state funding. The construction renovation grant round is highly competitive because there's a lot more money at stake. All the grant applications are ranked, and traditionally the top 8 to 10 are awarded the grant immediately, and all the remaining projects are put on a wait list. Our planning and design schematics and the cost estimate will be submitted as part of the construction renovation grant application. When awarded the grant, the state will pay for half of all of the renovation expansion costs, and the town and the library and the Friends group will combine our funds, and we will pay for the other half. Green buildings are encouraged and given additional financial help. We estimate that this construction renovation process could take about 4 or 5 years, beginning with the grant announcement in FY17. So when all is said and done, possibly in FY20 or FY21, we will have a 21st century library which offers a magical children's room with a grand entrance, one that is cheery, welcoming, and up to date, with a large, clear circulation desk, proper signage, low stacks, bright colors, and an activities room for craft times. A teen room that is also bright, welcoming, and encased in glass walls so they can be noisy, but we can still see them. One that is filled with technology and their collection of materials. An adult circulation desk which faces one direction. Low shelving for new materials. A reference area also with low shelving, and lots of technology and study tables, with space enough to house the periodical collection. Access to technology, a computer training lab, a copy center, private study rooms, private tutor rooms, beautiful, clear signage so that patrons feel comfortable navigating the building. A cafe, someplace for people to be able to eat and drink when they read and study. A library bookshop so that the Friends of the Library can sell donated and discarded books. A green building, which includes solar panels and maybe geothermal wells. the all-important book drop attached to the building, one that never overflows, and how do you feel about a drive-through? Okay, maybe I've just crossed the line, but these are all examples of what public libraries are offering their patrons today. So throughout both phases of this process, the Jones Library will appear before town meetings several times, asking for permission to apply for the grants, spend the money, and appropriate the matching funds. The entire community will be asked to take part in the design of the improved building. There will be surveys and focus groups. The more people involved in the process, the better. And the timing couldn't be more perfect. These state grants do not happen every year. And because we don't know when the next state grant will be announced, the Board of Trustees and I urge you to vote yes. I know that Amherst values education and libraries, and that is why Amherst deserves to have an up-to-date public library. Thank you.
I now call on Tamsin Eli to make a statement for the Joint Capital Planning Committee, I think.
I'm a trustee of the Jones, and I serve on the Joint Capital Planning Committee. And the Joint Capital Planning Committee approved the $25,000 match in its budget. It's being taken out of the Joint Capital Planning Committee's entire budget because the Mass Board of Library Commissioners needs to know soon that the town will appropriate the money for the planning and design grant match.
And Ms. Kruger for the Select Board.
Yes, on March 31st, the Select Board voted unanimously to recommend both Parts A and Part B of this article.
Thank you. And Ms. Ratner for the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee recommends approval of this article, both parts of it, unanimously.
Thank you. And this will require a majority vote. And again, we're voting on the motion under Part A of Article 5. And Ms. Wentworth has asked to be recognized.
Mary Wentworth, Precinct 5. I move to refer this article back to the library board. I am rather troubled.
Hang on just a second. Do we have a second for that motion? We do. You may now speak to your motion.
I'm rather troubled by the appearance by the library board that they haven't quite made up their minds between the expansion and renovation and pushing for a new facility. I believe that those two interests are not compatible, and I think that we need to know in no uncertain terms which way the Board of Trustees really wants to take us. Furthermore, I think that before we rush into spending a lot of money on the expansion of Jones Library, that we should look at the branch libraries, which certainly need attention, and see whether they can take some of the load off the Jones. Also, we have the East Street building that hopefully we're going to bring up to snuff, and that possibly could be used for some aspect of the library needs. So I think we need to have a clearer resolution before we move ahead committing funds to this project. Thank you.
Okay, so just let me explain the process a little bit. The motion before us now is a motion to refer this article back to the library trustees. So the next vote we take will be a yes vote if you want to refer this back and be done with it for this town meeting. A no vote would mean that you do not want to refer it. If there was a no vote, then we would be back to the main motion and we would have a second vote, yes or no, on the main motion. Hang on, and just one other point is what we want to do is, as much as possible, be discussing now the pros and cons of referral as opposed to the pros and cons of the main motion. However, I do recognize that there's going to be some crossover there, and it might be hard to talk either for or against referral without also talking about how you feel about the main motion. I'll be keeping an eye on that, though, and trying to keep us on track on the motion to refer. Yes.
It's nice to see you. So,
please identify yourself again.
I'm still Austin Sarrett of the Board of Trustees. Ms. Wentworth's motion, I think, is premised on something which I respect, but I think that what she's calling for is a little bit premature. The purpose of doing a feasibility study is to study the feasibility of what we can do in the building. So the idea that the trustees would be able to tell you right now whether or not we think we can renovate the building or whether we need to do something entirely different, it seems to me is a little premature. What we've asked the town to do is to give us permission to do a study which will help us determine the direction of the change that the library needs.
Ms. Wentworth, if you want, you can sit up here or you can go back to your seat. I'd rather see if there's any other discussion first, so if you could leave the podium so somebody else, it's free for somebody else if they want to. You can sit right here if you want. And we are opening this up to other discussion. Is there any other discussion? Perhaps not. Ms. Wentworth, did you want to say something else? I see, but I called on Ms. Wentworth now.
Mary Wentworth, Precinct 5 again. My experience with town meeting is that when we agree to commit a suitable amount of money, this is going to be $75,000, and whether it is town money or state money, it's still our tax money. That then there's this impetus to go forward with the project regardless of the outcome of the study. When you're spending money to hire people, they tend to tell you what you want to know.
And did I see another hand over there? Yes. And Ms. Wentworth, if you could take a seat again. Ms. Wentworth. Thank you.
Molly Turner, Precinct 5, and a former chair of the library trustees. I am going to vote for this motion to refer back to the library trustees. I agree with what Ms. Wentworth is saying. I have a couple of problems that are a little bit different than Ms. Wentworth, and one is that as the library has had these problems all along, and I'm not sure why they haven't been fixed, but there have been capital funds available for the renovation of the carpeting and to fix the roof. That's been ongoing for many years. But another problem that the library has always had is it hasn't had a large enough operating budget. And I don't know how the trustees are going to address that. If they expand or renovate, there's going to have to be a lot more money, a lot more salaries, and so forth. My second objection is about the green building. If you're going to make a new facility, and it's, Ms. Sherry said it's going to be a green building, I think that's a good thing because we, as a community, we need to think about our buildings because our buildings are great contributors to the problems we have with the climate. And I think that we should be, I don't see that building in itself is very friendly to the environment at this time. I think this is a bad time to be expanding and building.
Thank you.
And I recommend voting yes.
And over here on this side.
Louis Mainzer, Precinct 10. The general custom is when we propose to send something back to a committee, to refer it back, if the committee says we've done what we can, at this point, please do not refer it back to us. And this is not a rare event. We generally respect that, and I would do so in this case. The committee is saying we need a systematic, professional look at this. Please help us to do that. And I say, so be it. Thank you.
Yes, down at the end of the Finance Committee table. Keep talking, testing. Nope, not yet. Why don't you just pass her over the other microphone for now?
It's live. Sarah Swartz, Precinct 1, and I'm speaking as not Finance Committee, but as a town meeting member. And I would vote for this, and there's a few reasons why I would. One is that I think that we all know that the conditions of the buildings in town, they're older. We're looking for ways to make them work. There are not a lot of places for us to buy new land. There's really not money in the budget to actually build new buildings. I mean, I think we're going to see in this town meeting that the senior center would like a new building. The East Street School, if you've read the paper, the town manager is actually already looking to put a new service in that building, so that building is actually already being looked at for something. I think trying to use the buildings that we have and renovate them is actually a really smart thing to do. I think actually building is not something that we have an option for right now in our budgets. Trying to take the money that we have right now, this grant is not something that comes along every day. So taking advantage of money that we don't really have in our operating budget is smart. You know, the fact that if we don't get it, that the $25,000 comes back to us is a good thing. I think the library is being really clear right now that renovating is what it's looking to do. It's not looking to build. I think they're being really clear about that to us. And if you look at all of the problems that we're having,
go ahead.
Okay. If we're looking at the problems that we're having, those are all real issues. And I think we're also looking a lot right now at Section 8 and at helping families. The library is critical to education and to helping families. Not every child has a laptop. Not every child has a place that is safe and secure and quiet to study. We also need places for teens to meet that's safe and secure. The library serves all of these purposes. It is critically important. And I don't think you can leave everything up to branch libraries, although I adore mine, and I think they're really important. But I would vote for this for all these reasons.
And yes, in the back there, third row from the back.
Adrienne Teruzzi, Precinct 7. First, a comment. As a town meeting member, I've grown accustomed to supporting studies that have come in between 25 and 50,000. So it's 75,000 for a feasibility study. This is something new, and I follow it up with a question. These 75,000, it specifies here in terms of the project manager that it helps with site selection. So the question is, is site selection indeed part of the grant application process and the feasibility study? And if so, the next question is, where?
Ms.
And
Sharon?
I know we don't have the answer yet, but it is a question we have to ask.
Sharon Jerry, Library Director. Yes, it's an excellent question. And site selection is a part of the MBLC's process. We need to prove, if we're going to be asking for tax dollars from the state, potentially millions of dollars, we need to prove to the MBLC that the Jones Library is located in the best place it could ever be located. And I'm here to say, absolutely. I don't see it moving, ever. But you have to go through the motions. So if I were a betting person, I would be here to say, yes, I bet that it's going to stay right where it is. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, right there, third row.
Alex Kergrabe, Precinct 9. Just wanted to clarify, a previous speaker said they were speaking in support of this, and I believe we're talking about the motion to refer, but it sounded like they were talking about the original motion. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing is that another previous speaker said the $75,000 study, and just reading the Finance Committee booklet, it looks like we're only appropriating $25,000 from the town budget, and the other $50,000 is coming from this grant. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, great.
Ready to come to a vote? Way in the back there.
Siobhan Best, Precinct 9. I just have a couple of questions. It seems like I support Mary Wentworth's motion to refer it back to the library trustees because I feel like maybe they need some more information, and that would be in the form of a question from some of us, perhaps. I would like to know how many documented or occurrences there are of people having accidents, snow falling on their heads, or having people complain about scary rooms in the library, or I just wanted to know how many documented cases there are of that was mentioned. And I also want, the wording is not exactly clear about the intentions of the study and and what the goal is to actually build a new building. So I just wanted to say that. And also, in terms of teens meeting in a library, the library is supposed to be a place where people can study. I think if teens want to, be provided a space to meet and to congregate, socialize, we should be kind of talking about a teen center or a children's, I grew up in Amherst. I remember the Bangs Community Center was where we congregated. So library, I don't know if that's the most appropriate place, if that is reason enough to provide teens great study the art, expensive hangout.
And yes, second row over there on the left.
James Scott, Precinct 7, I call a question. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for the previous question. We will now come to an immediate vote on the motion for the previous question. If 2/3 of you vote yes, we will then come to a vote on the motion to refer. So we're first voting on the motion for the previous question, which is a motion to end debate. Everybody with me? Good. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. No. Moderator hears 2/3. 2/3. We will now come to an immediate vote on the motion to refer. A yes vote means you want to refer portion A of Article 5 back to the library trustees, and no vote means you want to take the referral motion off the table and go back to the main motion. All those in favor of the motion to refer, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The no votes have it. No votes have it. The motion to refer has failed. We are now back to the main motion under Article 5, which is in terms of Part A of the article. Is there further discussion? I see no hands. So we will now come to a vote. Point of order? Sure. Identify yourself. Yeah, wait for a microphone. Yes, so it sounds like it might be a point of order. If it is, I'll allow it. Otherwise, I won't. I don't know what it is. We'll find out.
Can we amend the article?
It could have been a choice for somebody to make a motion to amend
Can
that
I make
motion,
a motion to amend the article?
But you can't now. Once you
too
stand
late?
up and ask the question, you can't, because you've already...
Can someone make a motion to amend the article to delete the part to build a new building?
This is... So technically, yes, that is a point of order, and the answer to that is yes. You can't ask the meeting to do it. You're asking me, is this a legal thing to do? And the answer is yes, it is a legal thing to do. However, I was calling a main vote because I saw no further hands for discussion. So there weren't any hands for discussion, so I'm now calling a vote on the motion before you. I hear a point of order. Wait for a microphone, please.
Mr. Moderator, I believe a point of order is separate from a motion to amend, and therefore I believe as moderator you are able to allow the previous speaker, if you recognize her, to make the motion that she had proposed.
Maybe I would be, maybe I'm not. In this case, she was asking a point of order, and it was made and answered. So, please sit down, Mr. Kussner. So I understand what you were asking. I had already said that there were no hands and we were coming to a vote. I think I will open this up to discussion again because it seems that there's discussion again. But what you were asking was a point of order, so I believe I was correct in saying that you couldn't then make a motion. So that was a correct ruling on my part, I believe. Let's see if we are open to... Yes, a point of order, Mr. Steinberg.
Since there was a vote, where were we on the motion for the previous question?
Oh, that was passed, and then we voted on the motion to refer, and that failed. So we were back with the main motion on the floor.
The main motion.
Yes.
Okay,
is there further discussion on the main motion that's on the floor? Okay. Yes, back in the corner there. Can I make a motion now? Yes, you may. Please first identify yourself, and then wait for the microphone. Microphone first.
Hi, I'm Caroline Murray, Precinct 4, new. I would like to make a motion to amend Section A of Article 5, deleting the phrase, or building a new facility.
I hear a motion and a second. You may now speak to your motion.
So I think the Jones Library is in desperate need of renovation, and I go there, and I can't stand it, so I go and buy books instead at Food for Thought. And my mom just moved here, and she's elderly, and also we need to support the senior center. They're great. She can't deal with a library at all. The long hallway, the way everything is displayed. My sister's a librarian. She said she's never seen a library that's disorganized. However, I really don't think this is the time to be building a new facility. The location is perfect. The building is beautiful. It desperately needs renovations. I don't think we need to build a new facility.
Okay, so the motion on the floor now is to amend Article A to remove the phrase, or building a new facility. I hear a point of order. Hang on a second. Wait for the microphone.
Mike Rossin, Precinct 4. Is it in our power to amend in such a way as I heard that it was a take it or leave it whole thing that was being filled out, and you have to, and there's a question from the state.
I understand your question now. So the question is, are we allowed to make a motion, even though some previous speaker said that if it was changed, it would have an impact on the possibility of us getting this grant money? And the answer is yes, we are allowed to make that motion. Yes, front row, right in the middle there.
Larry Kelly, Precinct 5, but just to remind what the moderator just said, the library director said clearly that if that rider is not in there, they're not going to give us $50,000. And she's not a betting woman, but if she was, she would bet that the library is going to stay where it is. But if you want to get that $50,000, you got to have that rider in there. The state's just going to say no. I mean, we're going to be talking later in town meeting about $1 million for the Wildwood expansion, which is going to incorporate all the schools. It's not just looking at Wildwood. It's going to be looking at all the schools and as to whether we should build a new school or renovate or what have you. And that's $1 million. And the state's going to give us 60% of that. So 60-40 on that. This is 75-25. The state is...
Excuse me, I have a point of order. Please wait for the microphone. But you're still on the floor, Mr. Kelly, once we deal with the point of order, if you have more to say.
Michael Birtwistle, Precinct 2. I think the speaker is speaking to a different motion and should be ruled out of order.
Okay. Folks, you have to have a little bit of understanding that I am listening to what's going on, and if I feel the speaker is out of order, I will call it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't call a point of order, but in this case, I was listening, and I know he was talking about something else, but he was making a point that was, in my mind, related to what was on the floor, so I'm accepting it. Mr. Kelly, if you have more to say, you can continue.
A previous speaker had said that 75,000 struck her as being out of line, and as I said, we're going to be talking about $1 million somewhere, God knows, a month from now, whenever we get to that particular article. So anyway, again, dealing with the state, they love to have their I's, dotted and their T's crossed. So that's what this is. So let's dot the I, cross the T, vote yes. Let's give them the money. It's a great library.
Motion on the floor is the motion to amend the article by removing the final phrase. Is there further discussion before we come to a vote? Yes, the back row there. Actually, the second to back row, I'm sorry, yes.
Chris Hoffman, Precinct 7, and also a member of the Board of the Jones Library Trustees. I also agree. I would be a bit nervous about removing this clause. I mean, I have not been to every building and facilities meeting, but I've been to all the trustee meetings. And believe me, there is no secret agenda to build a new facility. We don't want to build a new facility. We want to use the existing building as much as possible, externally and internally. However, I would be very worried that blanketly saying that the money we're allocating could not be used to build a new facility might disqualify us from the grant. So I am fully support what the people have said, that we don't want to build a new building, but please do not amend this motion to remove that clause.
Is there further discussion? Yes, right here, third row in the center.
Precinct 6, I move the previous question.
Motion for the previous question has been made. We will now come to an immediate vote. If 2/3 of you vote yes, we will then vote on the motion to amend the article. Everybody with me here? All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Moderator hears 2/3. We are now voting on whether or not to amend Article 5 to remove the phrase "or building a new facility." If you vote yes, you want to remove that phrase. If you vote no, you want to keep the phrase in there. In either case, we then still have to vote on the final article. All those in favor of the motion to amend Article A by removing the final phrase, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. Moderator hears that the noes have it. We are back once again to the motion in terms of Part A of Article 5 that's on the board. Is there further discussion? Yes, not the second row, but the third row blue shirt. Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. Fourth row.
All right. In
The
tandem,
other
we're
third row.
calling the question.
Pardon me?
Tim Neal, Precinct 4. Both of us are calling the question.
Okay. Okay. A motion for the previous question has again been made. 2/3 vote. If we pass this, we will finally come to a vote on Part A of Article 5. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. I hear 2/3. We are now voting on Article 5, Part A. The motion is in terms of the article. All those in favor of the motion in terms of the article, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. It's passed. We now move on to Part B, and the motion is up on the board, and we need, I'm sorry, the article is up on the board, and we need Mr. Sarah to make a motion under the article. And you can just, you don't have to read it.
Austin Sarah, Jones Library Board of Trustees. I was going to read it. I move in terms of Part B of the article.
Do I hear a second? I hear a second. You may now speak to your motion.
Sharon, you want to say anything else? Okay, we don't.
Nothing else to say. Great. I now call on Tamsin Eli for the JCPC again.
JCPC voted in favor of this motion.
Thank you. And Ms. Kruger for the Select Board.
Again, the Select Board voted unanimously to support Part B.
Thank you. And Ms. Ratner for the Finance Committee.
Again, we voted unanimously in favor of this article.
And this also requires a majority vote. Is there any discussion on Article 5, Part B before we come to a vote? And yes, third row from the back there.
Mary Streeter, Precinct 8. I'm concerned that I don't have a clear priority from town boards and town management about the priority of what new buildings we're going after. We've had an excellent report in the past about the need for a fire station for South Amherst. We hear about LSSE wanting its own facility, and tonight I hear the senior center would like that as well. We need to have a clear understanding of what are the priority buildings, and then go after the grants that would help us to achieve those priority buildings, rather than just whatever grant happens to be available du jour and going after that kind of funding. I'm also concerned about money that we've spent from CPA funds in the past, to I think $40,000 for the roof, and I believe we spent a good deal of CPA funds for the HVAC system that I thought would cure the pneumatic, whatever it is in the HVAC that needs fixing that was mentioned tonight. Also, as a former elementary teacher, I know that you can really spruce up a place and make it very friendly and use signage for very little cost.
Is there further discussion on Article 5, Part B before we come to a vote? Yes, in the back corner there.
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. I just, based on the fact that we just had 45 minutes of discussion that I think was probably unexpected for the library trustees on this article, I just would urge the library trustees, if you're successful in getting the grant, to make sure, one, that the meetings associated with these activities are posted in the library in a very prominent place, so that people who use the library can feel invited to participate. That if you have an advisory committee to assist you from the community, that you reach out to the community so that you have an advisory committee that is probably somewhat more representative of the community than the trustees themselves, although you're elected, to sort of make sure that everyone feels represented. And try to remember that not everyone in the community has electronic access. And in particular, as you discuss matters related to the evaluation of the library, and you reach decision points and so forth that might involve coming back to town meeting, that perhaps you send out notices to town meeting members encouraging them to participate and to sit in on the process, so that what you bring back to town meeting will have really been vetted by not just the library trustees. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a point of order? Wait for a microphone if you have one.
John Cool, Precinct 2. It is now irrelevant because the speaker has desisted, but he was not on topic at all.
So again, I really am listening, folks. And Please trust me a little bit to decide when people are on or off topic. Thank you. Are we ready to come to a vote on Article 5, Part B? Yes. I see no hands. We will now come to a vote. It's a majority vote. All those in favor of Article 5, Part B, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. The ayes have it. We now move on to Article 6, Fiscal Year 2014 Budget Amendments. And Ms. Moran, I'm calling on you to make a motion under Part A of Article 6.
I move to amend the action taken under Article 16 of the 2013 Annual Town Meeting Fiscal Year 14 operating budget by increasing the appropriations and the amounts to be raised by taxation for the following accounts by $61,085. Public Safety by $46,947 and Public Works by $14,138, and to meet such increased appropriation by decreasing the appropriation and the amount to be raised by taxation for general government by $61,085.
Do I hear a second? I do. You may speak to your motion.
The school budget, when we vote the school budget, we vote a bottom line. When we vote the library budget, we vote a bottom line. When we vote the town budget, we vote about 6 sections of it separately, which means that if one section of the budget has a deficit and the other section of the budget has money left over, it has to come back to town meeting to switch the amount. In this case, it was a planned transfer. Money was set aside in the general government budget to cover union negotiations that were ongoing as of last year. Those contracts have been settled, and this is just moving the money from that general government account to where it should be to pay the agreed on salaries.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg for the Select Board.
Yes, I'm going to comment actually on all parts of Article 6. The Select Board voted on March 31st, 2014 unanimously to recommend parts A, B, and C, and to recommend dismissal of Part D. And the reasons are stated in the written report that we've provided to you. And so I will not ask to be recognized again on this article. Thank you.
Thank you. This requires a majority vote. And is there any discussion before we come to a vote? Yes, second row from the back there. Can we get a microphone?
Peter Blyer, Precinct 4. I'm sorry, this is maybe a silly point. The motion book has 61,058 and the screen is 61,085, and I can't behind the podium see the number to do the math myself. So I'm wondering which number is correct is all.
Let's figure it out. So is it 61,085?
It's 80. It is 85. If you add the two numbers together, they come to 85.
Yeah.
But thank you for the point.
Okay. Okay. Further discussion before we come to a vote on 6A. I see no hands. All those in favor of the motion under Article 6A that's on the board before you, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it unanimously. We now move on to 6B, and I call on Ms. Moran for a motion.
I move to amend the action taken under Article 16 of the 2013 Annual Town Meeting Fiscal Year 14 operating budget by increasing the appropriations for the public safety account by $54,000, and to meet such increased appropriation by transferring $54,000 from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriations account.
Do I hear a second? I do. You may speak to your motion.
This is, again, it has to do with the contracts that were settled. It's going to help boost the on-duty strength of the fire department to 8 during the academic year. It's also going to fund an emergency purchase of laptop computers for the ambulances.
Thank you. We've already heard from the Select Board, so is there any discussion on 6B before we come to a vote? I see no hands. We now come to a vote on the motion under 6B that is on the screen before you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Hear another unanimous vote. We now move on to 6C, and Ms. Moran, do you have a motion?
I move to amend the action taken under Article 17 of the 2013 Annual Town Meeting Fiscal Year 14 operating budget by increasing the appropriation for the reserve fund account by $160,028.47, and to meet such increased appropriation by transferring $160,028.47 from the fund balance reserved for overlay surplus account.
Thank you. We've already heard from the Select Board, and I actually omitted to tell you that all of the different sections of Article 6 just require a majority vote. It's okay that I didn't tell you for A and B because they ended up being unanimous. We are now on C, which also requires a majority vote. Is there any discussion before we come to a vote? I see no hands. All those in favor of the motion under Article 6C, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Also hear a unanimous vote there. We now move on to 6D. I call on Ms. Moran to make a motion.
I move to dismiss Part D.
Second. Thank you. I heard a second. You may speak to your motion.
Oh, we don't need it. And the Finance Committee recommends that unanimously.
Great. And the Select Board already expressed their recommendation. Is there any discussion before we come to a vote to dismiss portion D of Article 6? Can we get Part D on the screen, please? Is it there? There we go. Nope. Oh, here it is down at the bottom. Got it? It's talking about, Article 17 of the 2013. Oh, no, it's not there, is it? Nothing like typing with 200 people watching you. Huh? No pressure. There we go. That's almost enough to break my applause rule, but we won't do it. Okay, motion is before you. I didn't see any hands for discussion of Ms. Moran.
I didn't get to talk about Part C, but I just hope you all know that the reserve fund, which you will vote later for FY15, there is a reserve fund that the Finance Committee controls. It's been traditionally $100,000 every year. It is the only way that if money is needed to balance the budget right at the end of the fiscal year, that we can do it, because we don't have to wait for town meeting. And this Part C added some to that. We don't need this Part D because we have the extra from Part C. It is highly likely we won't use any of that money, and it will, well, we might use some for snow and ice removal budget or veteran services, but not nearly all of it. But it's just a fund in case there are last-minute emergency spending needed.
Thank you. Are we ready to come to a vote? We are voting on the motion to dismiss Part D of Article 6. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion to dismiss, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Article 7 was already moved in the consent calendar, as was Article 8, so we move on to Article 9 to see if the town will raise and appropriate $100,000 for the OPEB Trust Fund established under the provisions of Section 20 of Chapter 32B of the Massachusetts General Laws. And I call on Mr. Sharma to make a motion.
I move in terms of the article.
Second.
You may now speak to your motion.
Yeah, I suppose. Actually, I think I'm going to stand up and do it. First time. Sorry, I didn't realize the lights right on me. This article pertains to other post-employment benefits, and this has been part of a conversation in the Finance Committee for a couple of years now. So I'm going to take this opportunity and talk a little bit about this for those of you who might be interested in this. And then, if you have any difficult questions, I'm going to refer them to Sandy.
Seconded it.
The OPEB, as this is called, are the benefits owed to the current and former employees, and these are contractual agreements. That means we actually owe this money to people who are currently employed and people who were previously employed by the town and the schools. But these were not absorbed in the operating budget for a variety of accounting related reasons. The Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB for short, issued a statement in June 2004 requiring municipalities to perform actuarial studies of their OPEB liabilities. When a municipality had to conduct its first study depended on the size of its budget, and Amherst did that in July of 2007. So that's a very brief background. As of June 30th, 2012, the liability, the OPEB liability for the town, and the technical term for that is actuarial accrued liability, was, depending on the assumptions, anywhere between $48 million to $94 million. And the town estimates that these will grow at about 5% a year. Now, these liabilities are estimates, and these estimates are based on assumptions you put into certain formulas. So I want to emphasize the word assumptions. But whatever the assumptions, the liability is quite significant. It is non-trivial. So on a 30-year funding schedule, the annual required contributions that the town has to make to OPEB to fully fund these liabilities is anywhere between $4.6 million to $8.2 million per year. As of now, on a pay-as-you-go basis, contribution that we are making towards the retirees, current retirees, is about $2.5 million per year. So the gap is anywhere between $2.1 million to $5.7 million per year underpayment relative to the required contributions. Now, these numbers may seem huge, but the real story is not really that bad. Because this OPEB liabilities are not unique to Amherst. This is a statewide issue, and it's actually a national issue. Remember that we have actually a very good bond rating, and the S&P and the other bond rating agencies are watching this very closely. And we were recently upgraded from a AA bond rating to a AA plus bond rating. So, which means that we're doing something right. I think our financial position as a town is quite strong. And S&P has actually acknowledged in a recent report that we have begun to make contributions towards OPEB. This year, we are putting in about $100,000. Next year, we'll do about $200,000. The year after, $300,000. Even though these are small amounts, small relative to what the required contributions are, the fact that we are doing something about them is being noticed by the rating agencies. The town is, I've been on the finance committee for a couple of years now, and I can say that my personal experience is that the town is very well and very ably managed financially. So at best, OPEB is a long-term issue, and the town and the finance committee are already addressing it. I'll talk about in just a minute how what the strategy is to address this over the long run. FY15 is the first year, so we have started the process of making contributions to OPEB. And we will continue to take advantage of opportunities to add funds to OPEB Trust, such as Medicare Part D drug benefit reimbursements or other one-time funds that have built up over to about $1.4 million over the past 2 years. And we will get us to almost $2 million by the end of this town meeting.
Excuse me, about how much more time do you have?
Just one more paragraph.
Okay, I'm going to let him continue. I think this is pretty important stuff for us to be hearing. Thank you.
So a key strategy for the town to fund this over the long run, and we've got to think about really long run because these are long run liabilities, is to shift money from what we pay to the Hampshire County Retirement Board over to our OPEB funds over time. So once the unfunded pension liability is fully funded sometime around 2033. We are currently sending about $4.6 million per year to the Hampshire County Retirement Board, and when we have fully funded the pension funds, then we will shift those amounts which are going to the pension funds to the OPEB funds. So over the long run, we think we can manage this pretty well.
Thank you. And the motion, if I'm correct, the motion was in terms of the article, correct? Motion
Yes,
was in
sir.
terms of the article. Thank you. I call on Mr. Steinberg on the Select Board.
Select Board on March 31st voted unanimously to recommend Article 9 for all of the reasons that have been stated by Mr. Sharma and the additional, and there is discussion in the written report that we've provided. I mean, basically, I guess I'd make 3 quick points. One is we've made a promise to former employees and current employees. It's a legal obligation and a moral obligation. A lot of times this was made through collective bargaining, which is something that we also recognize as a very important legal obligation. Second point to be considering is that we're putting money in the OPEB trust fund in order to, as a way to invest the funds and to let them grow and to meet that obligation. But we will be able to, at any time that we need to, draw from the trust fund to meet those expenses. It's not something that needs to wait for any magical date into the future. And finally, Select Board very much agrees with the point that Mr. Sharma raised about the importance of protecting our bond rating because it reduces our borrowing costs for the many projects that we vote on each year. Thank you.
The vote requirement is a majority. The motion is in terms of the article. Is there discussion before we come to a vote? Yes, I see hands, second row right there.
Yes, John Fox, Precinct 10. I'm less comfortable with what we're doing. We've debated putting $25,000 aside.
Just talk a little louder, please, and keep the microphone close to your mouth.
We debated for a long time whether we should be putting $25,000 aside for the library. And we're told that we have a $94 million obligation, current value now. But we're putting $100,000 away, plus $300,000, I think, from water and sewer, just nominal amounts. We're falling $2 million behind, roughly, or $5 million, depending upon the actuarial figure. I did a little calculation this morning. If healthcare costs continue to rise, and the assumption is at 5% a year, in 20 years, the 2033, when you're assuming we're going to be having real money to pay, the total liability here would be about $230 million that the town would owe. I also noticed on Yahoo that the government is now estimating a rise in 2014 of 6.5% for this year, the healthcare costs. And if that were the annual rise, and it's purely speculative, but these are very, very elastic figures, the obligation in 20 years would be over $400 million that the town would owe. So I don't think that we are, even with the bond rating, I don't think we are addressing this as seriously as we should. I spent some time this winter in California, and all sorts of towns and cities that did pretty much what we did. Good bond ratings over time, hoped that in the future the money would be there, are now either filing in bankruptcy or threatening to file in bankruptcy because they can't meet what Mr. Steinberg has said correctly, are contractual obligations. So I would hope that next year at this time that we would get a presentation with real figures, that perhaps we'd have the actuary present. But we have to take this seriously because these are contractual obligations, and I'm very much concerned that as the years go by, and if we have another great recession, if healthcare costs rise, as they might, considerably beyond what we expect, and with the expectation where we know that the figure is going to be enormous in 20 years no matter what, I think we have to take seriously doing much larger funding on an annual basis, and that's painful. Because I really regret that we're not funding all sorts of social services that we used to fund. So we have to think about how to address that. And I think one of the things we have to face is that we may have to raise additional taxes. That's an awful thing to be saying politically, but I think the realistic thing is, and I think it's true for Medicare and Social Security, that we have to raise additional taxes. And we need to come to terms with that. So I hope we'll see a different presentation, a more robust presentation next year. Thank you very much.
Is there further discussion before we come to a vote? Yes, right there in the center, second row from the back.
Tracy Lee Bouchillier, Precinct 6. I have a question. I think I may have a point of order on the previous speaker. So, my question is to, I don't know if it was a board report or a committee report, but I'm looking at, I guess I need clarification on, are we speaking about the OPEB in terms of where the responsibility and obligation is, or the retirement, are we talking about the responsibility for the retirement funding and matching, or is it just the health care on OPEB? And that was to the comment, it was on the board report.
Okay. First of all, just to clarify, that's just a normal question, not a point of order, but it's a good question. And it looks like somebody on the finance committee.
That then would, depending on the answer, would then lead to what was, if what was stated was correct according to what's written in the report.
I'm sorry? I didn't understand that.
Depending on the answer to the question, what was stated may be different than what was written, what is written in the finance report.
Let's see if Mr. Slaughter can clarify things.
So just to clarify a little bit, currently we have a retirement pension obligation, which we pay to the retirement board, and that's covered in Article 7, our retirement assessment. OPEB is distinct and separate from that. It is a retirement based benefit that we provide, but that's why it's called other post-employment benefits, meaning not pension. It technically can include other things like dependent care expense and life insurance and those sort of things, but primarily it's a health care expense. So this is distinct from the retirement assessment that we pay. The state obligates us to pay the retirement assessment. About 20 or 25 years ago, they required us to join either regional trusts or the state in funding in an active way the pension aspect of our retirement benefits that we promise people. They have not yet made that the case for other post-employment benefits, but nonetheless, the same circumstance we were in 25, 30 years ago regarding funding pensions, this has come to the fore as far as other post-employment benefits.
Thank you. Are there further discussion? And yes, I see a hand back there.
Baird Tierkel, Precinct 4. 48 to $94 million is a big elephant in the room, in my opinion. As the previous speaker commented, we spend a good amount of time debating $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 at town meeting. And I think I just heard that the contribution we need to be making to the fund to fund the obligations we've made is between 2 and 5.7 million annually. And we're making a $100,000 contribution plus some additional monies out of the water and sewer fund for maybe 300,000. So we're so unbelievably underfunding our obligations. And I hear the strategy sounds like 2033, we might start to begin to fund at a full rate, and that because the rating agencies have increased our bond rating, we're good. I feel like that's not a good enough strategy for me that we're following. As the previous speaker said, I'd love to hear more about that, but more than that, I'd love to hear a better strategy, a more aggressive strategy, and whether that means bringing options to town meeting, because the options probably aren't going to be very pretty. And I believe more taxation is probably going to be part of that, you know, how to pull that off. One of the questions that I'll like to leave you with, and maybe the town manager or the finance committee can answer, is over the past couple of years, we have this massive liability for past and current employees. Have we changed any operations so that that problem is not being exacerbated, is not growing towards the future? Is the liability growing or shrinking based on our current hiring practices, on best practices for private and public government out there?
Thank you. Mr. Masanti.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd make several comments to try to respond to the points that have been made. First and foremost, the OPEB liability is not a new liability facing the town of Amherst or any other Massachusetts community. What is relatively new in the last 3 or 4 years is that we're now required by the National Accounting Standards Board to report the liability in our financial statements. It's always been there, but it's not been included in our financial statements. So to begin a very long-term effort to fund this liability, we started in 2010 with your approval to create or authorize the creation of an OPEB trust fund. And over the first couple of years, some one-time revenues totaling just over $1 million have been appropriated into the fund. Beginning last year, the water and sewer funds and their actuarial required contribution for the 15% or so of the total annual liability that is the water sewer share, that is now being funded in full by the water and sewer fund, and that is, you'll see that later in the budget for the FY15 water and sewer. On the general fund, for the first time, we're starting with an appropriation, and I think we don't have a funding schedule laying out dollar for dollar over the next 20 years until that magical moment in 2033 when we're all here looking to zero out the pension fund appropriation and appropriate the same dollars to OPEB. The thinking is that over a very long period, 30 to 40 years, we ramp up incrementally to the general fund number while fully funding the water sewer piece. And then, that trust fund being invested, et cetera, will bring down the liability. We want to try to do it in a way that doesn't basically tear apart and blow up the very delicately balanced way we're funding a variety of town, school, and library services and capital needs in the interim. In terms of working assumptions, you're right. Those working assumptions have a pretty wide range to them, and 100% differential, depending on what actuary you talk to, is not giving me a great amount of comfort. At the state level, there is discussion about state legislation about possible state help in helping to fund that liability, but also discussion in the legislature about which employees, for example, particularly part-timers, whether or not they would continue to be eligible for the full amount of retiree health benefits. That would have a direct impact on the calculation of the fewer liability. I think the key thing is that we need to start, and yes, it is a modest number, but it's not a static number either, and I think we would hope to grow that substantially over time.
Thank you. Mr. Pooler.
I just want to add
why don't you identify yourself, just so they know who you are.
Thank you. Sandy Pooler, I'm the town's finance director, and I just wanted to address one question that the speaker before had asked about what the town is doing to try to control this in terms of our management and hiring policies and so forth. And I would note that for the fourth year in a row, we are not having to increase our health insurance rates. That is a significant statement. There are probably not many of you who have had a similar experience with your own health insurance, that your rates haven't gone up at all over the last 4 years. And we've been able to do that by making incremental changes in cooperation with our employees and our unions to change co-pays, to change the structure of the plans, so that we've had a zero inflation rate in health insurance. And I think the next time we do an actuarial evaluation, which will be this summer, we do them every 2 years, you will see that reflected in what our liabilities are. So we do look at what this liability is. We take it quite seriously. And Amherst has taken what I think are extraordinary measures and very effective measures to implement changes in a way that are cooperative with our employees. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, to be able to have those cooperative relationships with our unions and our employees is worth gold, to be able to also cap your increase at zero. So I think that's a very important strategy. And I would just also note that just the other day I got a call from the finance director of another town saying, I saw what Amherst is doing with your plan, and I want to copy you. So what you're doing is important, taking initial steps. Agree with what Mr. Fox said before. We need to do more over time. This is the beginning of a process, and it needs to get bigger. We will be coming back to you in future years to ask for more money for OPEB. But I think this is a very important step, and I would urge you to support it.
Further discussion on Article 9. And yes, third row over on that side.
Paul Kaplan, Precinct 6. I'm not really good with financial matters, so there's a confusion in my mind, and maybe other people have this. If we're underfunded by, say, $5 million this year, and then next year we're underfunded maybe by $4 million, are we underfunded by $9 million or by $4 million? That's my question.
Mr. Pooler?
Nine.
It's afraid of that. Yes, right on the aisle there.
Hilda Greenbaum, Precinct 1. This may help with the problem a little bit. How is this money being invested? That may help it grow a little faster. And are we managing it ourselves, or is somebody else managing it?
Mr. Poor?
Since last June, we've started transferring money that town meeting has previously set aside into the state PRIT fund, which is a fund that is managed by the state treasurer. It's a fund into which a lot of cities and towns put their pension money, and they invest it in a broad array of stocks and bonds and other things. And the last time I looked at what our returns have been since we put the money in June, I think the last time I looked was in February, we were earning something over 8% on those returns, which is where we need to be in order, in the long run, to make this whole system work. So, yes, I agree.
And yes, in the back there.
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. To what extent would the transition by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to a single-payer healthcare system, I know we're self-insured, so we have somewhat maybe a rare amount of protection that we can provide ourselves. But what would the transition to a single-payer system at the state level accomplish for our liabilities under this fund, and to what extent are town officials participating in this process? I wonder if Mr. Pooler could answer that question, if he would.
Okay, maybe a brief answer. We're sort of diverging a little bit here.
The brief answer is it's impossible to know for sure, because you don't know whether, the theory obviously is that a single payer system would keep costs down. I don't know if that's true. I will assume it would. The real answer is whether it's a single payer or other key reforms to our healthcare system nationally. It's the containment of health insurance costs that is absolutely essential and is really the next stage in healthcare reform across the country. And we need to have that, not just for Amherst, but for the entire country, in order for our economy to be able to survive.
Okay, are we ready to come to a vote on Article 9? It looks like we are. Excellent. Okay, and this is a motion in terms of the article, requires a majority to pass. All those in favor of Article 9, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. Article 9 passes by majority. Article 10 was passed in the consent calendar. We move on to Article 11. It's up on the screen before you, and I call on Ms. Appy for a motion.
I move to see if the town of Amherst will vote to approve the following existing Amherst-Pelham Regional School District agreement for allocating the total amount to be contributed by each member town of the district for fiscal year 2015 as required by Section 6 of the regional agreement.
I hear a second?
Second.
I do. So in effect, she moved in terms of the article. And you may now speak to your motion.
Thank you. The school committee has voted to continue using the formula put forth in the regional agreement to determine the apportionment of the FY15 budget to each member town. Approval to use this apportionment method must be granted each year. However, unless this is approved at town meeting, the assessment must be calculated according to the method determined by the Department of Education under Education Reform. A model the Regional Agreement Task Force and the school committee strongly recommend against.
Thank you. I now call on Ms. Tileman for a statement from the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee unanimously supports staying with the alternative assessment method as voted by the school committee.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer for the Select Board.
The Select Board voted March 31st, 4-0 with one absent to wholeheartedly recommend this article as well, and our position is in your revision of tonight.
Thank you. This requires a majority vote. And is there discussion before we come to a vote? I see no hands. We will now come to a vote on Article 11. The article is before you. The motion is in terms of the article. All those in favor of Article 11, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Passes unanimously. We've now reached Article 12, the fiscal year 2015 operating budget, to see if the town will adopt a comprehensive operating budget for the ensuing year and raise and appropriate money therefor. I call now on Ms. Moran for a report from the Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, I would like 2 additional minutes.
With no objection, it is granted.
Could I have the charts, please? We present to town meeting a budget for fiscal year 2015 that provides essentially the same services as in the current year. This level of services is sustainable for several more years if, as estimated, revenues continue to increase at modest rates, if employee health insurance costs don't rise drastically, and if we restrain spending on new initiatives. Please look at the FY15 expenditures and revenues pie charts on the screen. It's also in the Finance Committee report. Each pie represents $80 million. 45% of our expenditures pie is for educating children. The red slice is for elementary schools. The green slice is our regional school assessment. 26%, the blue slice, is the town budget, including public safety, public works, community services, conservation and development, and general government, and debt service. The turquoise wedge, 12%, represents expenditures for the water, sewer, solid waste, and enterprise funds, and transportation enterprise funds, and exactly matches their slice of the revenue pie, since they are self-supporting. Assessments, the orange wedge, includes our annual payment to the Hampshire County Retirement Fund, that was in Article 7, and also the $100,000 for the OPEB fund. Of the revenue pie, 56%, the blue hunk, comes from the local property tax, a percentage that has grown over the last 5 years as the state aid slice shrinks. Any increase of the property tax levy is limited to 2.5% a year, plus new growth, which is property tax on newly constructed or renovated buildings. Other than a Proposition 2.5 override, encouraging new growth through responsible development is really the only significant way we have to increase our local revenue. This is a year when all property in town will be revalued. Revaluation doesn't increase revenue. It just readjusts what each property pays in relation to all the others. Other local revenue, the red slice is 8% of the pie, includes motor vehicle excise and the local hotel and meals taxes. Aid from the state, the green slice, is our second largest funding source, providing 8% of our revenue for FY15. This spring, the House and Senate agreed on the amount budgeted for local aid, which gave us much greater predictability in presenting the budget. Amherst state aid will increase by 1.9%, about $262,000, which is a little more than estimated when the budget process started last fall. We can't count on that in future years, so we don't want to build the extra into the budget. Instead, we recommend adding $100,000 to the FY15 capital budget for much-needed road repairs. Now, the state aid chart. State aid levels go up and down with the economy and are still not back up to FY08 levels. State aid was reduced by 20%, more than halfway through the fiscal year 2009, which meant that there had to be a spending freeze. 6 years ago, we had to vote the FY10 budget that was 1.4% lower than the previous year, requiring employee layoffs, cuts in services, and the use of $1.2 million from reserves to facilitate closing Marks Meadow Elementary School and to tide us over until the hotel, motel, and meals taxes kicked in. And now could I have the reserves chart, please? Article 21 would appropriate $125,000 to appropriate social services provided by outside agencies while alternate funding sources are sought. We do not recommend using reserves for anything else. Reserves should be between 5% and 15% of the operating budget, so that the town can sustain level services despite fluctuations in the economy and state aid. In fiscal years 6 through 10, reserves dipped perilously low to the bottom, as shown in the chart on the screen. As of July 1st, 2013, reserves stood at $7,654,514, or 11.2% of the total FY14 budget, which was a major reason for the excellent credit rating given the town earlier this year. In 2007, the chair of the Finance Committee delivered this message to annual town meeting. The town's reserves must be allowed to build up again so that we will have money available for emergencies, have some ability to protect services when the next economic downturn results in reductions in state aid again, and be able to protect our credit rating so that we save money on future borrowing for capital projects. Those were the words of Alice Carlosi, who served 15 years on the Finance Committee. We are in a reasonably good financial place now because we mostly followed her advice. Her advice was always good. She did her homework, she knew a lot, and she explained things clearly, she collaborated, and she treated everyone with respect. Her move to Northampton in 2008 was Amherst's loss. Her death earlier this month was a loss to the world, but we are all better for having known her.
Thank you. Now call on Mr. Musanti for a report from the town manager.
Thank you, and thank you, Kay, for excellent job summarizing your very first Finance Committee report to town meeting as chair. Kay is the latest in a long line of talented leaders of our Finance Committee, and I know the town is fortunate to have your predecessor, Andy Steinberg, now on the select board. The town of Amherst values maintaining high-quality services over time. The proposed fiscal year municipal budget represents an ongoing commitment to fiscal sustainability in a multi-year context. Town finances have stabilized and improved over the past 3 or 4 years. The proposed budget maintains level services, makes adjustments to deliver services more efficiently and effectively, and includes funding for a handful of strategic investments. For example, this proposed budget represents the 4th straight year we've been able to propose a budget that contains no premium increases for employee and retiree health insurance. This is the direct result of proactive multi-year efforts by the town and its employees to stabilize employee health care costs. The town has also maintained its commitment, I believe, to negotiate labor contracts that the town can afford and sustain. We have signed reasonable and affordable bargaining agreements with 5 of our 6 municipal unions, and we are in productive negotiations with the other. Salaries and wages are almost 80% of our budget, so controlling and settling these contracts at reasonable levels is essential to keeping the town's finances in balance this year and beyond. I am really pleased that we have good labor relations with all of our unions. We have settled contracts that are fair and that the town can afford. Another strategic investment in the proposed budget is to increase our firefighter EMT staffing philosophy to a minimum of 8 from 7 during the academic year. In addition, UMass is helping to fund increased staffing of firefighter EMTs at other peak times. The budget also increases social worker hours, serving seniors with increased town funding and with assistance from the Friends of the Senior Center, for which we are very grateful. The rental permitting program will be entering its first full year of budget support, and it is mostly user fee supported. So far, 120 days into the implementation of the rental permitting bylaw that you approved, that became effective January 1st, about 83% of the rental properties, nearly 1,100, have obtained a permit or in the permit approval process. I just want to thank town meeting for your support of this bylaw, and I also want to thank rental property owners for their collaboration and cooperation. It's really beginning to have a positive effect on the ground. The budget also proposes increased funding for our capital plan, allocating an increased share of the tax levy up to 7.5% this coming year, and that includes an additional $100,000 of funds for street paving, which a couple of you may have opinions about. Last, I just want to thank all of the town staff at all levels for their ongoing good work on behalf of the town. I want to especially thank Sandy Pooler, our very talented finance director, for his work, and also thank all of the elected and town boards. It's really a team effort. There's great dialogue and coordination and information sharing between the town libraries and schools, and I think it's helped to produce what I hope is what is a balanced budget and a much more stable way for us to deliver high-quality services in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we dive into this, just a couple brief notes. Article 12 is divided into a number of different sections of the budget. There will be a separate motion under each section. The motion will be for the bottom line of that section. In the Finance Committee booklet, there are line items explaining the money into that portion of the operating budget, the money going out of that portion of the operating budget. When we deal with each section, okay, so first of all, any motions that are made to increase or decrease dollar amounts must be made in terms of the bottom line. You can explain the intent of your motion, but town meeting only votes on the bottom line of these sections. Your motion must specify the dollar amount greater or less than the amount in the Finance Committee motion. I will accept multiple motions. If there are multiple motions on the floor, we will vote on the highest dollar amount first. We will discuss the line items and sections of each budget area, but the vote is only on the bottom line. We will quickly go through all the sections to see if there are questions from the floor, and while we do this, I will not accept a motion for the previous question. After we've reviewed all line items, members are free to be recognized for debate, opinions, etc., and at that point I would accept a motion for the previous question. I will now recognize Ms. Swartz to make a motion under Community Services.
I move the town raise and appropriate $1,778,749 for community services.
I hear the second. You may speak to your motion.
Okay, because everyone has the detailed Finance Committee report and has had time to do their due diligence, I'm not going to repeat this report, but simply highlight the most important information. The Health Department has seen an increase in its budget of 4.6% as a result of how it now budgets shared services with Northampton. There has been no increases of staff or program to the budget. To clarify, Amherst has shared a health inspector and a public nurse with Northampton, each community getting half the time and services of each employee. Because of episodic occurrences and emergencies that resulted in too many hours for the nurse to handle, this arrangement changed in FY14. Now, Amherst employs a part-time nurse, which is a benefited position. The FY15 budget reflects the full-year cost of the nurse. Amherst still employs the health inspector and shares his time with Northampton, which reimbursed Amherst for half the salary and benefit costs. The senior center budget has increased 5.3% due to increasing the hours of their part-time social worker from 15 hours to 19 hours a week. Increasingly difficult and complex needs of seniors make this a priority. To reduce reliance on State Executive Office of Elder Affairs grant funds to pay for an administrative staff person, more of that position will be paid for out of the town general fund. The conservation and development budget increased by 13% due to 2 large changes. Oh, sorry, no, we're not doing that yet. Sorry, I'm rushing. The Veteran Services budget increased 3.6% in order to fully fund the assessment from the Central Hampshire Veteran Services District. This district was organized several years ago and is a prime example of the benefits of regionalization, since it can now provide better outreach and services to the area's veterans.
Thank you. Just so people, in case people haven't made that connection, I'm looking at page 21 of the Finance Committee booklet, and that's where you can see the line items under Community Services. I now call on Ms. Brewer from the Select Board.
The Select Board voted unanimously on March 31st to recommend this motion on Community Services. In fact, if you look at our revised Select Board report, page 2, you will see that there are basically no comments under the operating budget. And that is because we knew that the Finance Committee was going to write this extensive report. And there were basically no surprises to us in the budget that was presented to us based on the guidelines we'd given to the town manager. So we really have very few additional things to say beyond the Finance Committee report, and I wouldn't ask to be recognized again.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly go through the line items to see if there's specific questions or comments. I do have a piece of paper from Mr. O'Connor talking about a motion to add new money to community service for something that's not related to these line items, so I'm going to wait and talk about that motion after we go through these line items. So first, any questions or discussion on public health? I see no hands. Any questions or discussion on senior center? Yes, right there, third row.
I think this is relevant. This is Gordon Freed, Precinct 6. If you look farther in the report, you'll notice a dramatic decrease in the number of children in town. What I'm wondering is, if we assume we're all aging in place in town and still living here, is there a major increase in senior citizens' inflow into town? In other words, is the amount of seniors increasing dramatically, or are we just losing a lot of children?
Anybody care to comment on that? And you don't necessarily have to. Pardon me? Yes, right there, yes. Thank you.
Nancy Pagano, Precinct 5. I'm the director of the Senior Center. The population of our older residents, 60 and older, between 2000 and 2010, the federal census increased 34.8%. It's expected to increase the same amount by the next federal census. Amherst is a great place to live. People don't want to move away. The needs and the complexity are off the charts.
Any other comments on senior center? Let's move on to veteran services. No hands there. Leisure services and supplemental education. See no hands there. Pools. No questions there. And golf course. Yes, front row.
Larry Kelly, Precinct 5. So that looks kind of break-even-ish there. But does that budget include employee benefits insurance and capital? And if not, what would that additional cost be? Give you a hint, it's about 60,000.
Mr. Massanti? Oh, Mr. Pooler.
The operating budgets of the departments do not contain health insurance or capital. Those are, health insurance is within the general government, because we put all health insurance in one budget for all the departments, and of course capital comes under the section of the JCPC report. However, if you look at page 72 of the Finance Committee report, Appendix B, it shows what the budgets are for the departments with health insurance amounts allocated toward them, and then you'll have to do the math separately to look at what the capital appropriations are for JCPC. That would be in the JCPC report.
Thank you. Any other questions on the golf course? Okay. So I believe, Mr. O'Connor, I've got this green sheet. Are you intending to make some sort of motions? Next, you need to step up. I need to talk to you a little bit, because this won't work.
Okay, at least I made the motion this time. We're just waiting for another minute. Mr. O'Connor has to write down the motion that he wants to make. So talk amongst yourselves. I should mention, it's a very short motion. It really will just take a minute, so don't go away. people aren't interested in more budget.
I am recognizing Mr. O'Connor to make a motion.
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. I move to add to the
Why don't you
community.
here? Do you have your own copy? Here, why don't you read it, because this is what you need to say.
I move to increase the community services bottom line by $125,000.
I hear a second. You may now speak to your motion.
This motion is to add a social services line item to the community services budget in the amount of $125,000. A second later motion to deal with the question of where we get the money will be to reduce the planning department budget by $200,000. And these motions have their roots in two separate FY 2015 budget proposals by town officials that are embedded in the community services and planning department budgets and in the long-range direction of the planning department. Approval of both motions would eliminate the use of reserves to support the FY 2015 budget. The first budgetary decision is a direct outgrowth of the town's failure to submit a Community Development Block Grant, a CDBG, proposal this February. Left stranded by town officials' inability to negotiate the purchase of Echo Village for affordable housing were two other CDBG components: limited social services funding and money for the grant-funded town employees who serviced our previous CDBG grants. And just a brief thing about CDBG grants. The town has been singularly unsuccessful for competitive grants simply because of certain our economic indicators. And it has been enormously frustrating to sit in town meeting during the years when we were not an entitlement community and listen to the difficulties that in fact used to be presented to us by a former planning department staff member and now select board member about the difficulties of having to apply for grants. You know we're good, but our economic indicators were not going to get us enough to get. And so part of my concern is keeping the planning department staff online. Town officials' rationale for not including social services funding in the operating budget under community services in Article 12, and instead offering a one-time appropriation set forth numerous places in the budgetary books. I've looked at them. The justification for permanently adding the 1.25 CDBG staff equivalents to the planning department are also set forth in the budget. And I just simply disagree with the decision to do one, put one in the budget, the employees, and not the other. We have a police budget every year. We don't know how much crime we're going to have happen, but we know we're going to have crime that we need to deal with. We have ambulance service and fire department service for the same reasons. We can't predict the individual activities that will occur, but we know we need those services. The same is true for our social services budget. This is a need that is predictable, annual, as regular as anything else in our budget, and it needs to be in the budget. These two decisions represented a clear choice to increase property tax funding for the planning department by 1.25 FTEs, or full-time equivalents, who with the demise of CDBG funding will do what? And that's the question I have. Rather than permanently funding social services for thousands of town citizens. If we have fewer planning department staff people, town meeting may not see a diminution in the number of zoning articles we face each year, but at least those articles will bear the names of the real beneficiaries, have to follow the same rules and guidelines as other petitioners, and the cost of their formulation will be borne by their sponsors rather than by all of Amherst taxpayers. This is an annual recurring expense. It belongs in the budget. It should be larger, but this is an agreed upon amount. I'm not here to increase that amount, but I'm here to say that it belongs in the budget. Thank you.
So we now have before us two different dollar amounts for the community services budget. When we do finally come to a vote, we will first come to a vote on the larger amount, which includes the additional $125,000. If that fails, we would then come to a vote on the smaller amount. And just to repeat something I said earlier, the motion was made to the bottom line, and that's all we're voting on. The person who made the motion made it clear what his intent was in terms of adding a line item, and in the history of town meeting, that's been respected by the different budget areas when this sort of motion is made. But again, all we are actually voting on is the bottom line. Is there further discussion on this motion to increase the amount or on community service budget in general? Yes, second row there.
James Scott, Precinct 7. I strongly ask your support in not supporting this additional $125,000 increase in this section of the budget. I see it as highly irregular way to manipulate the budget that's gone through.
Let's not talk about motives, okay? Let's just talk about the effect on the budget and not manipulation.
The creation of a budget is a multi-month process of public meetings, of careful consideration, and I think that this particular kind of adjustment would have been more appropriate at a committee meeting rather than bringing before the town meeting to make this adjustment, where we have no perspective really as to the other kinds of decisions that the Finance Committee and the Select Committee made in presenting us with the budget. So I ask you not to support this.
Ms. Moran.
The Finance Committee had heard that some motion like this might be made, and we discussed it at our last meeting, and we would recommend against this amendment. We think that the way the budget has been set up is the way to get the social service agencies funded this year, to take it out of reserves, and for the town manager to and staff to look very carefully for other sources of funding for these social service agencies in the future.
And yes, right there.
Pat Church, Precinct 5. I've been a town meeting member long enough to remember when we did have a really good discussion, and it was clearly in the budget. It is not clearly in the budget, but it is in the budget. It's just not where it belongs. I think this is a move that would make our funding and we talked about our liability to our employees. I think we need to talk about our liability to the people that need our help.
Yes, right there in this middle third row from the back.
Bob Greeny, Precinct 10. I'm definitely reluctant to walk into town meeting not having sat through all the work that you people do and question your wisdom, but it seems like over the years, off and on, I've been a town meeting member, this has been an issue. And I really can't comprehend how a town of our size and our budget has no fixed yearly ongoing social service component. For that reason, I'm going to vote in favor of the additional money.
Just a reminder, everybody, hold your mouth close to the microphone when you're talking so we can all hear you. And yes, right there.
Janet McGowan, Precinct 8. I wonder if someone could speak to the services being provided with that $125,000 now and what the consequences would be to people if it wasn't raised somehow next year, I mean, the following budget year.
Mr. Masanti?
Sure. The discussion about social services funding, as you know, is not new. And the town, over many, many years now, has fallen in or out of eligibility for federal funding that serves low and moderate income people across this country through the Community Development Block Grant. In the years that we have been eligible for CDBG funding, a social services program has been funded with federal dollars, and I've made clear multiple times in public that the broadest possible tax base from the federal level absolutely should be the way we fund these basic needs in a much more progressive way than relying on a relatively more regressive property tax. What has been clear over the past couple years, whether it's a federal source or a local source, is that priority social service functions have been funded. Last year there was a special article funding it from free cash. Years prior there were CDBG, and back in the day that you all know there were line items in the budget. The three agencies that are identified by name in Article 21, totaling the same $125,000 for social services, are clearly stated. $70,000 for the emergency homeless shelter, $35,000 for the Survival Center food pantry program for nutrition programs serving low moderate income people, and $20,000 for emergency funds to the town of Amherst on a case-by-case basis, covering basic needs for people, things like fuel assistance or rental assistance and things like that. So there are monies in the budget. I still think it remains, should remain an objective of the town to identify a funding source longer term that's a much broader based funding support than reliance on the local property tax. And the article that's before you later on the warrant gets the recommended amounts to the social services agencies while we continue on that long-term effort. But I think the town's commitment to those efforts are clear in the specific recommendations that have come to you over the past couple of years in particular. And we're going to keep at it, and I've been encouraged by the Select Board to keep at it, and it's been a clearly articulated priority of the Select Board to help us address basic needs in the community.
There, further discussion. Mr. Steinberg.
Yes.
sort of not sure how to begin with this, but I just have to recognize that I was chair of the Finance Committee until March 26 when I resigned the day after the election. And so I was involved in these processes from the perspective of the Finance Committee. Mr. O'Connor, in his motion, recognized that Article 21 would fund the social service agencies that are purposes listed, and they would end up coming from free cash. And I think that was mentioned by Ms. Moran in her report. And he was questioning whether it should be funded from the budget itself. What happened was that we, on the Finance Committee, had established an amount that we gave to the town manager to propose for funding the various budgets within the municipal functional areas. And he had stated the intent to apply for community development block grant funding for the $125, that would cover the $125,000 of expenses. As Mr. O'Connor recognized, in February, because negotiations fell apart with the potential for putting in a CDBG grant that would have the principal purpose of funding something at Echo Village, we lost the ability to ask for funds for the smaller piece. And at that point, the town manager had fully committed all of the funds, and in order to fund social services, it was essential that we find a mechanism, and we agreed that Article 21, or what became Article 21, was the appropriate mechanism in its place. Now, the other suggestion, which is very difficult to talk about because we're really talking about a motion under community services right now, was the stated intention to make adjustments later in the budget. And Finance Committee reviewed all of the budgets, met with all of the department heads, and looked at what the town manager had recommended very carefully, and concluded that all of the recommendations that were made sense, were absolutely needed, and were priorities of the community, and but it was seemed appropriate to recommend. So under the totality of all of those circumstances, I would recommend that the lower amount be voted, the amount that was recommended by the Finance Committee, and that when you get to Article 21, that is the place this year to fund it. It is put in as a transition purpose, and we should deal with FY16 budget a year from now. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yeah, way over there.
Jim Brissett, Precinct 6. I'm kind of curious if the later motion or the later article that funds this, I believe, comes out of the reserve fund or whatever we call it. So what would prohibit us from using the reserve fund to pay for the $125,000 if it occurred in this item?
Hazard a response there? Oh, yes, Ms. Moran, I'm sorry.
Well, if no other section of the budget is reduced by that amount, when we get to, I forget what article it is, but there's an article about free cash to balance the budget. It would come out of free cash to balance the budget.
Further discussion? Yes, right there. Wait for your microphone.
Amy Middleman, Precinct 5. So Article 21, the $125,000 is coming out of free cash. So I believe what he was asking is why can't this part also come out of free cash. It's the same money. And then the second thing I want to know is why is it not appropriate to make permanent funding for social services, yet it is appropriate to make the salary of two employees permanent for a grant we don't currently have?
Mr. Musanti.
Yeah, just to clarify, nothing is being made permanent by any vote you're taking on the FY15 operating budget. You're voting an appropriation of money to support the budget for the fiscal year July 1, 2014 to June 30, 2015. Decisions on funding and staffing levels and any other priority spending would be made by future town meetings. I think the basic question, though, from the last couple speakers is there's really three ways to do this. There's the way that's been recommended, where there's an appropriation on the table for community services with a social services article in Article 21. You can amend the current article, and you could fund a portion of the article from free cash, 125,000 or otherwise, or you could vote the higher budget as a raise and appropriate motion, which I think is the motion that's currently on the table, and then when we get to Article 22, which is the free cash article, there would need to be, all else being equal, there would need to be an appropriation of free cash from that article. I think the reality of any three of those approaches is that we end up with $125,000 to fund 3 social services agencies.
Yes, right there, second row.
Vera Dwangmani, Precinct 7. I do want to support the motion to increase the bottom line by $125,000 because I feel that if we can support the golf course constituency, we can certainly make legitimate also the priorities of families who are trying to put food on their table to feed their kids and also to find warmth from the cold in the winter months.
Yes, third row right here.
Edith McMullen, Precinct 2. Mr. Steinberg used the word transition. Does this lead us to suspect, hope, whatever, that next year's budget of the community services will include the social services that are now in Article 21?
Yes, Ms. Brewer.
Maybe. So here's the deal. A bunch of you have been here longer than I have. I've been here since '99. Some of you have just started. We do have this argument every year. What are we going to do about this situation? One of the things that hasn't been brought up, for those of you who are newer, who may not have heard this before, is that somebody has to decide which agencies get money. So it's one thing to say, the town's going to provide this much money to a senior center, which is going to have this many employees. The town's going to be part of a veterans administration that is now a regionalized service, and it will provide X. Otherwise, then when you have a community services line, as we have sometimes had in the past, it says, here's a lump of money. Then some group of some people, which has had various iterations over the years, usually an appointed committee, will decide who gets that money. So it might be really important to one of you that Big Brothers Big Sisters get money every single year. But they didn't get money every single year because it depended on who they were competing with. Same for the Survival Center. Same for the homeless shelter, which of course we didn't even have back when we had a separate community services line. So it's not impossible. We can go back and do that again. but it's a different way of approaching things. And what this budget has done typically, since we've taken it out of the community services line, we've put it separately and said it's in block grant or it's in this separate bridge situation. Just as last year we had a transition situation because we were getting transition money from the mini entitlement because they knew they were throwing us out of the mini entitlement program. So if we go back to that previous situation, then we have to have a group of people who decide, who will somehow convince all of you that they made the right decisions as to which agencies get money and which don't. And we all know lots of agencies in this community that we think are important. And do they get 2,000? Do they get 20,000? Do we spend 500,000? Those are obviously decisions we would need to make during the budget cycle. So if it's really important to you that we put that lump back in community services and that we have a committee, again, different than our block grant advisory committee, perhaps similar to our previous human services committee, to do that, we have members sitting here now who have served on that committee. But you have to understand that it doesn't mean you are necessarily getting X when you put that in here, whereas you know this means so many full-time equivalents. You don't know going in if you agree with the list of applicants they decided to fund this year or not. But if that's really important to you, write to the select board and the finance committee and tell us that, and then we would have to talk to the town manager about whether or not that's the way to go in future years.
Let's see. Yes, the back row in the center. Yes.
Catherine Gilbert Espada, Precinct 6. It seems to me that we've had so much more money when we had the community block grant money. I don't see why we have to why can't we just talk about adding the $125,000 in addition to Article 21? Does that make sense to anyone? Yeah.
And yes, fifth row in the center there.
John Hornick, Precinct 7. I want to agree, first of all, with something that was said by the town manager, which is that there is no permanent funding in town government. Every year, de novo, we make new decisions about how much to appropriate for what. Obviously, there's a lot of carryover. We tend to say the same thing or decide the same thing, but that doesn't mean under law that it's permanent. The second thing that I want to say is I personally don't care how the $125,000 comes about in a particular year. I don't think it matters very much. I think in talking about this, though, as saying, is it going to be permanent or not permanent, or it's come from here or come from there, we're missing the point, which is it's not a lot of money. It's not equal to what the town has given for these social service functions or community service functions, even in the last year. I think that's a much more significant problem or issue than where it comes from or whether it's going to be permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, right there.
Hi, Kenton Tarp, Precinct 1. Bottom line for me is we need to at least set a precedent this year for having a community services line in the budget. And it comes and goes, and it may not be here next year, but I think if we at least vote to have it, it'll set a precedence that, you know, this town meeting really wants to have this as a part of the line item in our budget. And it just seems to make sense. I mean, why wouldn't we have this as a line item in our budget? Now, if it comes to planning, and they have a line item in the budget, and we can increase or decrease that, we should have a line item for community services. Comes to the planning department, and there wants to be a motion to delete some of that. We can have that discussion, whether we want to delete 1.5 or whatever, or however much we wanted to delete from that department. If we decide not to delete it, and we keep the whole 125,000, then the budget's still balanced because we just now make Article 21 or dismiss Article 21, take it out of free cash, which is basically the same thing as taking 125,000 for the planning department out of 21. Then at least we've set the precedent that we've got this line item in the budget. And I think that is really what we're discussing here. Should it be or should it not be? And I really think it should be. And it really doesn't make any difference at this point where the money's coming from for planning or for this. The important point is that we have this in the budget. And then if we get CDBG funding and, you know, we can decide what to do with it, all the better. I mean, I think we should be funding a lot more than we're funding for social community services. If we get CDBG money, then we can, you know, fund some more things. Or we can use it for something else if we want to. But at least we have this as a line item in the budget, which is the overriding reason we need to vote for this motion right now. Thank you.
Are we ready to come to a vote? Yes, I see a hand right there.
Renee Moss, Precinct 6. And in full disclosure, the co-chair of the Amherst Human Services Network and the director of Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I do want to just echo what was said. To have it as a line item in the budget does say to the human services community and does say to the families and the individuals that we serve in Hampshire County, in Amherst, that as a town, we're committed to this population, we're committed to these services, and we're proud to do this and have it in our budget. We'd be one of very few towns in the Commonwealth that have it. That's the way it used to be, and we were proud of that. And in years when we get CDBG, that would be great. And when we don't, we at least know we have the commitment. Over the years, that number in the budget has changed. I remember there was a year when there was hardly anything in it, but we kept that budget line because of the belief in it, and that was very important. And in terms of the process by which that money is allocated, that committee, the Human Services Funding Committee, which then became the CDBG Committee, which was pretty similar in its composition, worked so hard to do diligence that to make sure that that funding was going to agencies that were really meeting a need in the community. They were following up on how the need was met. We had to submit proposals that were very, very detailed, that you know, were really very thorough to make sure that that money was being spent the way it was supposed to be spent. So I would urge you to support this because I think it puts it in a place, because the bottom line is going to be the bottom line, and this is going to come from free cash no matter what. But I think that the commitment to having it here is a commitment that the town cares about this population.
Are we ready to come to a vote? Mr. Hayden.
Thank you. I will be very brief. When the select board took the vote on deciding to use free cash to support these services in this very same amount, we're very cognizant of the unintended consequences that we need to keep in mind. If we go ahead and just raise taxes, we have to recall that there are people who pay those taxes, those property taxes. And I've certainly gotten a number of calls about people who are just this close to having to move out of Amherst because of our sky-high taxes. We, as a community, have demonstrated our support for these services. I think that this bridge loan is one way of giving us a year to getting to the resources that we can afford to spend on this very service. I want to put in a plug, as some of my colleagues have, for the process that we go through in trying to determine when we spend this money this way, what those consequences might be. This is why we have the Finance Committee meeting interminably for months leading up to now. This is why we have the Budget Coordinating Group. This is why we have our Select Board meetings. This is why our email is public, so that you can say, hey, look, this is important. Thank you.
And yes, center right here.
Jim Perazzi, Precinct 1. The money is all going to come out of the general fund, whatever we do. If we leave it the way the select board would like, they will have total control of everything. If we vote for this addition, at least we'll have some community input.
I don't see any hands. Now I see 2 hands. In the back there.
Precinct 4, I call the question.
Motion of the previous question has been made. We will now come to a vote. If 2/3 of you vote yes, then we will come to an immediate vote on the higher number there. I'll explain that when we get to it. We're voting now on whether to end debate and come to a vote. All those in favor of the motion of the previous question, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Moderator hears 2/3. So we will now come to a vote on the larger amount, which is $1,903,749 for community services. Everybody with me and understand? So if we vote yes on this, we're done with community services. If we vote no, then we would come to a vote on the lower amount. All those in favor of the higher amount as seen on the board, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no.
No.
Wow. Okay, if I see 15 hands, we'll have a tally vote. And I do, so we will have a tally vote. So the first thing that has to happen here is we need 6 tellers. So let's see if we have previous tellers who would like to come up and be tellers. If you've been a teller before, come on up, and we'll see how many we have. I want you to come on up here, because I want to talk to you anyway. I'm going to wait and see if we have...
You gonna vote?
Attention everybody, I'd like to give a quick explanation of how the tally vote works to make sure we get it right. First of all, since this is the first town meeting, everybody should have their tally vote cards with them. You will be passing card number 1 towards the aisle where your tellers are located. Make sure it is card number 1. Pass a red card if you're voting no for the higher amount that we're voting on. Pass a green card if you're voting yes. Please stay in your seats until the tellers have collected the cards and your row has been released. If, hey, pay attention folks, this is important. If you're not in your seat, if you're not seated in your row when the tellers collect the cards, we will not count your card. So you can't hand your card to a neighbor and go off somewhere. You need to be seated until your card is handed in, and the tellers release your row. That's really important. Okay, tellers may begin collecting cards. No, we do not ask to stand for yes or no for tally vote. Hang on. Could you pass the microphone to Mr. Kusner? Tellers, you can keep collecting cards, but he has a point of order.
So, Mr. Moderator, Rob Kusner, Precinct 3, I have to admit that you're the moderator and I'm just a member of town meeting, but in all previous town meetings that I've served in, not only do standing votes involve standing, but the tally votes generally do as well. Well, let me just finish my.
Let him finish,
thank you,
please.
Thank you. The point simply being, and I've served as a teller, that it allows the tellers to verify that the number of yes votes and no votes that are in their hands agree with the number of people standing. And whether you remember or other members of town meeting remember, I think it's a prudent practice, and hence I would recommend it.
So for at least the last 10 years, I feel pretty confident saying tally votes, everybody's remained seated and passed in the red and green cards. And that's how we've done it. Maybe before that we did something else, but we have not asked the yes or no's to stand for a tally vote, just for a counted vote. So tellers can continue collecting.
Good. Yeah? Yeah. It is, but Joe's... Ooh.
total yes votes were 79. The total no votes were 74, so the larger amount has passed. Save your applause for later, please. Before I recognize Mr. Hayden, I want to explain something. We have a rule in town meeting that says that after 10 o'clock, we need the approval of town meeting to continue on with another article. But the sort of the catch-22 is that if somebody moves to adjourn, that's not even debatable. So in order to allow us to debate, if we want to, whether or not to continue, the Select Board's going to make a procedural motion to continue debate beyond 10 o'clock. This is a debatable motion. You're welcome to briefly speak in favor or against if you want to, and we will come to a vote. A yes vote will mean you want to continue. A no vote means you want to be done for the evening, and then following that, most likely Mr. Hayden will make another motion. So I now call on Mr. Hayden.
I would move in terms of the article that we do consider the next warrant article.
No, I'm sorry. Mr. Hayden.
Yes, sir. Oh, read.
You have to, you're making a procedural motion to continue debate.
I would like to continue debate after 10 o'clock.
Do I hear a
move
second?
to continue debate.
Do you want to speak in favor against that or not?
No, I just want to say that I will offer the motion every night so that you can make the decision, and it's not up to me.
And is there any discussion before we come to a vote on continuing debate? I see no hands. So if you want to continue debate, you will say aye, otherwise no. Right, so, all those who would like to continue debate, please say aye. All those who want to say no, please say no. The noes have it. Mr. Hayden.
I move to adjourn until Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
Do I hear a second? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. We are adjourned.